How close have you come to dying?
Story 1. I fell 5 stories 55 feet, was pushed off a balcony. Luckily, I landed on a patch of grass that was about 66 feet with cement planters and a gridiron fence around it. Lucky spot to hit from that angle. Broke over 25 of the bones in my body, was fully paralyzed from the waist down, had a broken rib puncture my lung, 1 compound fracture almost made me bleed out, cracked my head open on a balcony going down and again on my own knee during impact, was in hospital for a year. The paramedics that initially brought me to the hospital would visit me from time to time saying they needed to see a win. The spinal surgeon urologist told my dad he was excited because he never usually gets to work on these meaningful injuries like that are usually DOA, have made a full recovery since then. Story 2. I got stabbed in the chest when I intervened as 2 men were assaulting a woman. The knife got stuck in my rib cage, but a few millimeters to left and it would have hit my heart, so pretty close. Story 3. Twice, my heart stopped due to drug overdose. The first time, I woke up out of nowhere to people going through my pockets and 2 guys talking about what dumpster to put me in. The second time, my first wife had to do CPR to revive me. That time, I felt like I almost died. I was ice cold and a slight blue color. I was out for over a minute. You all will be glad to know I don't with drugs like that no more. Story 4. I almost stepped in front of a semi-trailer truck that was doing 110 km/h through a red light. The only reason why I didn't step out onto the road earlier and get splattered was because my lighter was playing up and it didn't want to light my smoke, so I stopped to cup it. I could say that smoking saved my life that day, but on the flip side, I might have been paying more attention to the traffic if I wasn't trying to light my smoke. LOL. Story 5. I got smashed underneath a truck after the jack stand slipped. Smashed me while on my side, breaking almost all my ribs coming off the sternum. Collapsed lung. I accepted death that day. Once I relaxed and realized I was gonna die, I started hearing ribs pop until the truck rotor hit the ground and stopped. I was then able to wiggle myself free. Only thoughts were, I can't believe my wife and kids are gonna find me like this. Even tried writing I love you in the cement. Story 6. I was bear sprayed and hogtied while some coked up loser put a gun to my head and said he would blow my brains out unless I gave him something that I didn't have. That was fun. Story 7. I've taken a toaster bath. I've odd on cocaine multiple times. I've dated people that could disappear me. I have vertical scars on my arms. But the closest, slipping in the shower, I broke a tile with the sole of my hand. When I got to the hospital and the nurse cleaned my wound, I saw my own artery. Fun fact, it started pumping blood noticeably faster when I saw it. Fucking scary. Story 8. Allegedly, when I had surgery, my surgeon found a tumor that was about 2 centimeters away from my brain. For those who care, I'm 14 years clean with no recurrence. Story 9. 4 doses of the jumper cables on the ride to the hospital and in the ER. Can't even remember how many units of blood, 285 stitches, fractured skull, 6 broken ribs, punctured lung, truck hit me head-on in my car. Story 10. I've drowned to unconsciousness twice. I've also been shot in the head with an air pistol, stabbed in the hand which I raised and blocked the knife with, accidentally overdosed and had my stomach pumped, almost been crushed by a falling tree, fell backwards off a cliff but got grabbed and hauled up by my friend, got thrown off my bike and almost been ran over by a lorry, almost got hit with flying debris from a car crash, got trapped in a forest fire on foot. And probably some more stuff I can't remember right now. My wife says it's a miracle I'm still alive. Story 11. Almost drowned, was ready to die, but my whole family was at shore, didn't want them to witness my death, so I found some strength to get out. Couldn't even stand up, coughing up water. Reevaluate your swimming skills before doing stupid a hit. Story 12. 20 years ago, I was probably 2 minutes from blowing my brains out. I was sitting on the bed in a motel with all my life crashing down around me. I had my sidearm next to me with 2 rounds in the mag. Why 2? In case the first one misfired. That's how resigned I was to it. Story 13. Pretty close. I had a neighbor who was self-medicating and got it into his drug-addled head that the man living next to him me was Satan, and he needed to kill me before I broke into his house and killed him in the night, so he got a big gun and shot about 100 holes into the side of my house in an attempt to kill me. I hid in my bathtub for several hours while this psycho turned my house into Swiss cheese while the cops waited for an opportunity to charge into his house and grab him. Thankfully I wasn't hurt, but he ruined my household. Story 14. When I was a child, I used to take a part in some pretty silly but fun games with 3 other kids, where we would challenge each other in different ways. We were on a farm with a barn full of hay bales, and one of us came up with the idea to see how long someone could hold their breath while their head was buried under the hay and the others sat on top of them. The rule was that if someone tapped another's thigh, it meant they wanted to be let go. Everyone respected that until it was my turn. I remember them laughing as I started to panic and the light above me disappeared, until I somehow went into shock. I pushed all 3 of them off me, punched the first one in the face as hard as I could, and then ran away crying. Now that is a memory for life. Story 15. I almost got hit by a car while crossing the street, earbuds in, totally zoned out, and this car came out of nowhere. I jumped BAC just in time, but my heart was racing for like an hour after. I still get chills thinking about it. Story 16. A serial rapist was spotted prowling in my town. This would have been in 1998. Big deal. Guy attacked women in several states. For a couple of days, we were on lockdown at school, no recess, etc. Our parents wouldn't let us play outside either. I remember mom freaking out because she heard noises outside. I remember seeing cops with dogs going through the creek. He was eventually captured after not very long, and is serving a life sentence. Many years later, probably 10 years ago, I was reading an article about the guy. It talked about his 1998 escape, and how he made his way to my town and attempted to break into homes. It specifically mentioned a street close to mine and how he was looking in windows. As a 7-year-old boy, I was probably not his target, but I sometimes wonder if Mom did, in fact, hear him outside. Story 17. Oh, I got a few on. Once I ran my bike between gap of 2 trucks to a stone from a cliff, just fell a feet. I hated me once. 3. And dangerous of all, once I loved a mentally unavoidable girl. Damn, I barely survived that. Story 18. I lost conscious in the midst of free falling while skydiving. Thankfully managed to regain consciousness and activate the parachute before reaching the ground. Survived with a fracture ankle. Story 19. I was home alone and started to choke on a vitamin. Couldn't breathe for maybe 2 minutes. Felt like my head was gonna explode, and I rammed my whole body into the wall and I coughed it up. Now I don't take any pills unless I'm near somebody or on FaceTime with someone. Story 20. When I was 6, I was in my dad's living room with all my Legos spread across the floor while I was building a spaceship of some sort. When I was satisfied with it, I got up and excitedly ran to the bathroom to show my dad, who was taking a shower at the moment. Once he opened the door, we heard a really loud crash come from somewhere in the apartment, and when we went out to look, the entire ceiling in the living room had collapsed into our living room, including all the contents of the apartment upstairs like table, couch, chairs, and the like. There was dust and debris everywhere, but my dad and I both looked at each other like I had just dodged death. If I had been sitting there not only a few seconds longer than I did, I would have been crushed. Story 21. Was on deployment in Afghanistan on patrol. Was my first tour, and as a gunner, Taliban ambushed and fired RPGs at our MATV. All missed but one that exploded right at the side of the gunner hatch. If it wasn't for my Kevlar helmet and the turret, shrapnel would have probably taken my head. Story 22. Fell off a cliff and got a semi-fracture in my neck. Guess that was a close call, and got washed away in the Pacific Ocean. Without my friend noticing, I would have been in big trouble, as I didn't have the strength to swim back myself. Story 23. Had taken Xanax while drinking once. Ended up sleeping for 36 hours straight. Didn't think much of it until my friend told me that I could have easily overdosed. Story 24. Thought my winter driving skills were the and nearly crashed into a gas station pump, causing a massive explosion. Obviously was the since I didn't die. Story 25. Tried to hang myself off of a pine tree. I planned it for weeks and marked the branches where I needed to stand and where my head needed to be with permanent marker. Also measured out the rope just right. When I jumped, I hit the ground before the rope could extend. I did my math wrong. Got serious rope burn on my neck and could barely swallow for weeks. I'm not going to explain how I got my math wrong because unfortunately I could see people saving this post using it to do the same thing to themselves. Never could achieve it successfully again because the first attempt was so scary that survival instinct stopped me from jumping again. Story 26. I almost died at birth due to being a preemie with low blood sugar. I was in that lil clear box for 9 days after I was born, and they kept me in the game until I could keep myself alive. Since then, I've been in some car accidents but never nearly as close to death as my birth. Story 27. 5 years ago we climbed Mt. St. Helens in Washington. On the way down, I lost my footing and fell. The climb is basically moving on and around boulders. I remember rolling for what seemed like forever and having the time to think, holy, I'm going to do. Then just like that I stopped. Our friend had been further down and instinctively threw out his arm and stopped my fall. I was so lucky not to have a serious injury. I have scars, but I lived. What really gets me is my husband telling me that as he watched me fall, had never felt so helpless in his life. Story 28. Doctors refused to diagnose or treat my asthma before I turned 5 because apparently toddlers can't have asthma according to them. So between the ages of 2 to 5 I was regularly hospitalized for asthma attacks and nearly died a few times. Fun fact, the reason my parents decided to get health insurance. Otherwise I would have bankrupted them as a toddler. Also I was in a car accident a few years back that according to the police, body shop repair guy, insurance adjuster, and my doctor, I shouldn't have survived. I walked away with only a bruised leg. Wear your seatbelt, y'all. Story 29. When I first moved to Cali my family and I went to the beach. While in the water I made the mistake of turning my back to a wave. Got toppled head first straight into the sand. And for like a second or two I was stuck and panicking. I would call it close. But for the split second I was very sure I was dead. Story 30. Very personally, I believe I was dead for a little while. I overdosed and tried to hang myself. When I came back everything felt wrong. Like I didn't belong here. I have felt this way for over 23 years. Story 31. Pneumonia, stopped breathing, and turned blue. Would absolutely have died except my son called the ambulance and did rescue breathing until they came and breathed me into the ER. All the sounds went quiet. I've heard that's called auditory exclusion and that soldiers under super stressful combat get it too. Story 32. I've had a few missed calls from the Lord. I nearly drowned when I was a toddler. I watched a tree get struck by lightning about 20 feet from where I was standing. It destroyed every electronic in our house. But I was fine. I got in a severe car accident when the driver of our car wrapped said car around a tree on my 19th birthday. Story 33. I have had 3 very close encounters. All with cars. One was T-boned at a red light at around 50 miles per hour, spun around 3 times and hit a cop car. I was a few seconds from a fatal hit, but instead I just broke my elbow. 2 disgruntled customer waited for me to get off at 11 p.m. turned his headlights off, and sped directly at me. I jumped backwards just in time. 3 was sitting up against a concrete wall at work on my brake. Random car decides to floor it and drive directly at me. They only swerved about 8 feet from me. They were fully on the sidewalk except for one wheel. Story 34 Panic attack. 100 feet deep in the ocean. It got to the point I could not breathe in anymore and my brain cut in. If I didn't breathe out, I'd die. Nobody in sight. I breathed out and swam for the surface, not forgetting the 5M safety stop. You can see the surface, so no panic at that point. Story 35 at 35. Way too many times that I'd actually like to admit. There were nights of attempted suicide. Like actual attempts, there were nights where I thought being drunk and driving a Mustang at 80 miles an hour was an acceptable thing to do in your early to mid-20s. There were times when I was deployed that I thought I probably wasn't going to make it back home. There were times when I just wasn't paying attention, and almost did something stupid, like accidentally letting my knee touch a heat sink full of 227 VC. Other times like when I slipped on a roof 40 feet up, or when I was chainsawing a tree with a broken ladder. I'm not going to say it's unfair that women generally live longer, but I'm going to say there's not much of a mystery as to why. Story 36 I've been in a car accident where we flipped over several times and landed upside down. I've been in a house fire, I've gotten alcohol poisoning, I've had a gun pulled on me, and almost 2 years ago I did way too much cocaine one night to the point where I actually thought I was going to die. Story 37 I had pneumonia a few years ago. That was scary. I remember the student nurse shouting at the doctors for not detecting it earlier cause I was drowning from all the fluid in my lungs. Story 38 It was a while ago when I was just 13 years old. During winter me and my friend were lurking around some abandoned place which looked like a stadium, and on the corner of it there was like a small fire which looked like it was a pile of trash burning. My friend decided we should go there and warm our hands a bit, and we went and crouched near it basically warming our hands for about 3 to 4 minutes, and out of the blue something just exploded in our face like a flashbang. Literally couldn't see for a good 15 seconds. I still vividly remember it. It was a small gas cylinder underneath the pile of the trash, and I'm not sure if someone put that there on purpose with bad tendencies, but my friend believes it might have been the case. They did a good job though on the attempted murder, but we somehow got lucky with only a face and hands burn and a few scars to carry on with life. Story 39 Almost drowned, almost fell in a pit, almost got hit by a car, many times, almost hung myself by accident. There's more probably but I can't remember. Story 40 Woke up driving straight towards an unguarded cliff into a fjord. This was a while ago and I had no reasonable way to get an international cell plan. The other 2 people interested backed out, and I went alone because no way was I cancelling a trip to Iceland. Middle of the northern portion of the Westfords, no way to contact anyone, paper map, and a pre-planned route. I used Google to check the morning before leaving. I was running late for my hotel. I couldn't call to let them know or change the reservation for, and then that happened. Drove slowly and very attentively to the next town, took a nap, chugged caffeine, and got the hostel before they called the police about a missing tourist. They were concerned, but just glad I showed up. Story 41 Depends. Had my life threatened by a knife to my throat by a person I used to know's boyfriend. Apparently had some cerebral hemorrhage as a toddler, a few seconds to a few minutes away from various attempts, got an injured lung, casually hung out with someone over a weekend who later turned out to be a murderer. Not sure which of those are closest. Think one of the attempts though or knife against my throat. Story 42 My appendix ruptured, but my liver and intestines stuck to it avoiding everything spilling out and peritonitis. They sent me home from the ER and spent the whole day turning from pain on my bed. The next day I got an ultrasound and they sent me to another ER to have surgery. 2 weeks later got infected and they had to put a drainage in it. That was done awake, with local anesthesia. That does not work when they puncture your intestines with a huge needle. Story 43 I've almost drowned 4 times. Interestingly, I was saved by the same lady 3 of those times. Once in a spring she saved me, once in a pool she saved me, twice in the ocean she saved me once, and the other time I made it out by pure luck, but she was also there. Story 44 Choking on melted cheese from a McDonald's poutine. I recall tapping my mum to alert her BC I couldn't talk. She just looked at me then continued eating. As I was panicking, my little brother's drink was right there and I was debating on whether or not to drink some because I knew he would be mad at me. Like my brother off or continue choking. It shouldn't have taken me too long to decide, but obviously I drank some. Also, alcohol withdrawal. Story 45 I was jump-started back to life after an electrical shock. A female coworker kept that a possibility by administering CPR until the ambulance got there. Story 46 I legitimately don't understand GERD but was diagnosed with it after COVID, and because my bed's broken, I've woken up choking a few times and felt for sure like I was gonna die, but I'm probably dumb. Story 47 Just on Good Friday I was in a boating accident and got trapped underneath my capsized boat in complete darkness. I was holding my breath for about 2 minutes and said to myself okay this is it, and went to breath in a lung full of water to end it, and by absolute chance I breathed in and was in a tiny air pocket. So I then had to figure out where I was trapped, and about 15 minutes later from freeing myself I was rescued. Story 48 So I woke up and my legs started jerking uncontrollably, and then my whole body started having spasms. It went on for about 20 minutes and then my wife called an ambulance and I blacked out. When I woke up in the hospital they immediately had me drink a colon cleanser drink. It cleared me out pretty quickly. According to the doctors, The toxicity levels were so high it almost killed me. Now I drink one of those cleansers about once every 6 months. I had assumed that since I eat fairly healthy and don't drink or smoke that my colon would naturally clean itself as a perfectly healthy person's would. I've learned now from multiple doctors that there's a very high percentage of people that think they are healthy, but have one of many conditions in the categories of autoimmune disorders or the wide range of mild colitis, Crohn's, or colon disorders that may even be in remission where your body is not absorbing the full range of nutrients from foods while bacteria grows even with eating recommended fibers. Story 49. When I had the norovirus and I was alone at home by myself, my roommate and his girlfriend made some nice dinner and we had a nice evening. My roommate went over to his girlfriend's place to sleep. Suddenly at around 1 a.m. in the night I wake up shaking and feeling the saliva build up in my mouth. I run to the toilet, puked my insides out, and then when I thought it can't come worse, also everything had to leave from the rear, it felt like a water jet. Anyways, there I was sitting on the toilet, exhausted, sweating, feeling like, but I thought it was over. It wasn't. I felt nauseous suddenly and passed out. The doctors explained to me that this is typical, that happens due to the huge shift of fluids in the body, or something like that. On the way down I hit my head somewhere, maybe on the small ledge of the shower, and I don't know how long I was laying on the bathroom floor with my head busted open and bleeding all over. When I came to again, my only wish was to somehow make it into my bed and I had no strength to call for anyone. I passed out again in bed in a few minutes. Sometime in the morning my roommate's girlfriend arrived, and when she saw the bathroom she rushed into my room and woke me up. We called the ambulance and doctor said I was very, very lucky. Even healthy people can die from dehydration, and in my case also the loss of blood. Man, I seriously thought when I closed my eyes while in bed, this is it, was scary. Story 50. Cancer caused a broken femur. Doc doing new hip only did half a job and pasted me back together as he thought I was going to die in his table. They don't like it when you die on their table. It causes them extra paperwork. Story 51. Twice. Choking on food and had to have the Heimlich maneuver used on me. It hurts. And severe preeclampsia with HELLP syndrome. My blood pressure was scary high and it gave me edema pneumonia. Story 52. I can't swim. Never learned it. I can keep myself afloat and paddle like a dog, but moving in a body of water is hard. One summer I went to a lake with some friends. We all went in at some point and they made their way to a little floating island in the middle of the lake. I was hesitant at first but tried to paddle my way over there as well. Halfway trough my legs started to get tired but I tried to push trough anyway. Big mistake. They suddenly felt like heavy boulders dragging me down. I wasn't able to move them at all anymore. Panic set in and I had troubles keeping my head above water. I could barely get air in so I couldn't even scream for help. The slight current of the lake and the adrenaline in my system got me back to the shore at some point. After this experience I've never not listened to my body when it tells you to stop. I now also understand why a drowning person is silent. Story 53. Copy-paste from a different thread. I was homeschooled and worked full-time for my dad once I turned 14. We repaired private water systems, which usually involved pulling pumps out of wells with our pump truck. Most pumps in our area were submersible and 200 to 500 feet down a well. Most of the time it was just me and my 18-year-old brother on the job. The boom on the truck would pull 20 feet of pipe and wire 3 eyes, positive, negative, and ground, to power the submersible at a time. My job was to coil the wire and guide the pipe once we disconnected it. One day we got in a real tight spot where I didn't have a good place to put the wire, and I was basically coiling it underneath where I was standing. My brother hadn't reconnected the winch cable back onto the pipe going into the well, and slammed his wrench down on the pipe jack that was keeping the pipe from sliding back down the well. Without it being connected to the winch on the truck, the pump and 2 feet of piping shot down the well. Hey race, the problem, the wire I was coiling underneath my feet was connected to that dropping pump. The only thing that saved my legs or my life that day was that I was able to brace my arms against the side of the pump truck and the side of the pump house. It had wrapped and pulled a couple of times, but never tight enough that I wasn't able to get free. This was the 90s. Us working on this type of job at our age was barely blinked at. Story 54. 3 times extremely close to death. My mom was pregnant with twins. A physical accident during pregnancy caused her to lose my twin brother. I was able to survive drank drain cleaner when I was a toddler. My idiot dad put it in a Gatorade bottle under the sink. Third one was a couple years ago. I looked left before crossing the street, then looked right, and started crossing. Little did I know that in the time I moved my head from left to right, a souped-up sports car that was 100 silent came barreling around the corner at top speed. They had to swerve into the other lane to avoid hitting me. Story 55. Throughout my life, very close many times. Surprised I'm still here. TBH, risky driving, attempts, drugs and alcohol. I'm tired of it all, just want to have a peaceful life. Story 56. My first memory is of touching the metal tines on an electrical plug while trying to plug in a plastic Christmas tree when I was 2. I had wanted to hear the music. I remember waking up in the ambulance. Horse stomped on my back when I was 4. Didn't break any bones as, according to Theb doctor, I was too flexible. Still got a rib that doesn't like to sit tight though. Popped a lung when I was maybe 8. Blowing up a balloon. Got real tired and fell asleep. Before I knew anything had gone wrong. Woke up and the side of my face was swollen up. Made a crackling sound when touched. My mom rushed me to the ER. Doctor said the hole had sealed itself back up, and that I should be okay provided I take it easy. Also that they'd never encountered that situation before, but I am unclear exactly which aspect prompted the comment. Lot of pointing neon signs that got ignored. I have EDS and POTS. and wasn't diagnosed until I was 34. Plenty of other happened over the years, but those were some of the big ones. Story 57. There's a few incidents that would've and should've killed any normal person, but because I'm so silly I've built a tolerance to them. One notable one was crashing into a lamppost head first going 30 miles per hour on my bike without a helmet. Story 58 inches. Motorcycles wreck that messed me up pretty bad. If I had hit the car slightly to the right I would have pancakes myself. Was doing about 45 when a dude pulled in front of me, so from 45 to 0 in a second, I'm imagining your organs would just explode. Story 59. Probably less than 12 inches. I was walking and talking with a friend. Glanced down the road and went across. Didn't see a semi-truck, but my buddy pulled me back. Almost walked into in front of an 18-wheeler going at least 45 around what I would consider a blind corner. Story 60. I blacked out while driving due to a medical emergency I had. When I regained consciousness I was overlooking a large canyon. I had gone off the side of the road and crashed into a rock right at the edge of the cliff. It was the only large rock in the area that could have stopped me from going over the edge. Story 61. Pretty close. I had a massive stroke, heart surgery, and learned to walk again all in the same year, the hardest year of my life. The nurse at the first hospital I was taken to told my wife, "Get him out of here, he's dying." Story 62. OD, heroin and fentanyl, alcohol withdrawal, seizures and DTs, but can't say how close that was. Car accident as a kid, saved by the only tree on the side of a mountain. We would have gone off a short cliff then rolled down a steep hill, got a helicopter ride from that crash. Small rock slide, or whatever you would call a dozen or so rocks 2 to 3 times the size of a human head and smaller rocks bouncing flying right through my friend and I hiking. No injuries, but a couple of those came within inches, could have easily killed. Appendix ruptured, some lucky near misses. Threatened at gunpoint by someone who could have either accidentally or purposefully shot me in the head over literally nothing. Story 63. Close on 3 occasions. A mortar in Vietnam, almost landed in my lap, almost in a deadly car wreck, and almost bled to death on another occasion. Thank God I'm still here. Story 64. Pretty close. First time, saw the bright light in the tunnel. Second time, hammer went down on what I assume was a dud round, since there was a round in the chamber, but no earth-shattering kaboom. Third time, I stopped breathing long enough to stop caring that I wasn't breathing, and after the initial discomfort faded away, OMG, it was the best feeling I've ever had in my life. I remember thinking, wow, this makes it all worth it. Story 65. Multiple nights in my life my asthma and acid reflux activated simultaneously and choked me for hours. All I could do was sit up, clutch my chest, and force myself to physically gasp for air once every 30 to 60 seconds so I didn't suffocate. It took years of dumb doctors before I was properly diagnosed, and now I take medication. I'll never take breathing for granted. Story 66. When I was 9, I tripped and fell halfway through a window. Legs were inside, and torso head arms were outside. I ended up with stitches in both arms and one shoulder. If I had fallen all the way, I would have died. Story 67. Found out I developed heart failure in 2020. It was so damaged that if I hadn't gone into hospital when I did, I would have had a fatal heart attack within 2 hours. Story 68. When I was a kid, I was walking home from school with my brother and mum. The traffic light crossing sound started and I walked without looking. My mum snatched me back last second as a car flew by. Turns out it was the crossing going the other way and I was walking into traffic. Lesson learned that day. Story 69. Worked in construction. End of a long stint far from home. I was exhausted and closed my eyes while standing for a moment, and then felt the wind off an excavator arm swing past my head. I blink and I see it pass me. Last fall was scary. At the time I had palpitating heart and I was sick as well. I went to the bathroom and when I was done peeing and zipped up, right when I turned around to wash my hands, for a 0.0000001 second my mind and body literally felt like it was simultaneously turned off, like I blinked out of existence for 0.00001 second was like woke as I noticed that while being conscious and was still standing, thankfully, so didn't fall and hit my head and potentially secondary death that way. That makes me wonder if people died in their sleep because their bodies simultaneously turned off. If so, what caused it? Is it because of the conductivity or displacement of various metals inside our body? I dunno, man. But I'm glad I'm still here today because I have a dream to change people's lives around the world for the better, and you'll be pissed if I die before that happen. Story 70. Hard to say exactly. I guess just about as close as you can get without actually dying. There has been several different times in my life where I felt it was it. The one I will share is on a Sunday morning. Already have put in 110 hours that week. I rolled a truck twice. I was about 20 miles outside of town on a not very busy road. On the second roll I was tossed out the passenger window and my head got busted pretty bad and my back was broken in 2 places. I was out there badly injured and unconscious. It wasn't until my boss happened to glance at the GPS map and see my truck wasn't moving and shouldn't be stopped where it was. My company yard was in the next town 45 miles away. When I wasn't answering my phone and she checked GPS and saw that my truck had went from 60 to 0 way to quick, she alerted EMS and her son headed out too. From over 45 miles away he beat EMS to me. When he arrived I wasn't breathing and he couldn't feel a pulse, so he began CPR. I don't know how long he did, but when he finally revived me he was almost give out. And it seemed, and I was disoriented and in tremendous pain once I woke up, like it still took EMS a long time to get to me out there. But had he not came out and gave me CPR, I don't think I could have survived until the ambulance got there. And it was the hand of God that anyone even realized I needed help when they did. Story 71 I was out in the woods once exploring, and let me tell you whatever is out there is either trying to kill you or, so as you can see I'm still alive chalking. Story 72 3x within a few weeks of each order. When I was 19 I was in a severe car accident. I broke my spine and was in a lot of pain and could not care for myself. I attempted suicide, and a few days after being released from the psych facility I contracted severe pneumonia and ended up in the ICU. The hospital bills were egregious. Story 73 When I was a little kid, my whole face swelled up so much that I was rushed to the doctor and got told there was some bacteria or something in my eye. It was removed, but there was a high mortality rate for the procedure at the time. Story 74 When I was younger, about 6 to 7 years old, I almost got shot by a pistol during a New Year celebration in where a man was firing at the floor, and I was happening to run to the direction of the bullets when someone pulled me instantly out the way. Story 75 Rolled a car, a severe concussion, another severe concussion, grabbed a live Jacob's ladder, hospitalized for a perforated lower intestine, M53, and have had about one a decade. They're getting more mundane though, just got out of the hospital for high BP. Story 76 Aquaplaning in a turn, semi coming towards me, I just let go of the clutch, turned the steering wheel and hoped for traction. Inches from certain death, I got traction and my car slammed into the side of the road. I had to stop and just breath for a while before driving on.